Good evening, everybody. My name is Mandy Lynn, and I'm the coordinator for Gemini Inc. in San Antonio. And I have with me Valerie Aragon, who is our development manager, and she's going to be managing tech. She's going to help us with our group chat. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback you'd like to give our author and moderator, please drop things in the chat, and we'll be sure to take a look and read your comments. Um, so, I want to tell you a little bit about Gemini Inc. before we get started. Gemini Inc. is San Antonio's creative writing nonprofit home, and we have been in existence for about 33 years. And we partner with a lot of community organizations to do writing out in the community, but we also have a lot of low-cost creative writing classes and free programs here. And the Big Texas Author Talk is just one example of our free programming. We, after 10 years in the same old building that is starting to fall apart around us, are getting ready to go to a brand new home that University of Texas San Antonio is helping get us into. We're very excited about that, but we are asking the community for donations to help us with that move. So a little bit later, Valerie is going to drop some information in the chat about how you can support Gemini Inc. And now the Big Texas Author Talk. We started this program in 2020 out of a need that came from the pandemic. And we are still going strong. We're no longer doing this monthly. We are here seasonally now. And for this spring installment of the Big Texas Author Talk, we are really excited to have with us Lauren D. Woods talking about her brand new book, The Great Grown Up Game of Make Believe. And she also has with her moderator, Michael Dawn. So I'm going to first share Lauren's bio with you. Lauren D. Woods is the author of The Great Grown Up Game of Make Believe, a short story collection that won the 2024 Autumn House Fiction Prize and was longlisted for the PEN Bingham Prize for debut short story collections. Her stories and essays have appeared in Best Small Fictions, the Antioch Review, The Normal School, Passages North, and elsewhere. Lauren works in consulting and lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, 4 children, and a variety of pets. Lauren grew up in the Dallas area and graduated from the University of Texas. And moderating the conversation is Michael Dawn. And Michael is the author of Partners and Strangers from Carnegie Mellon University Press in 2019. He's a finalist for the Four Word Indies Book of the Year award in short fiction. His stories and essays have appeared in journals such as Washington Square Review, the Southampton Review, Passages North, World Literature Today, Puerta del Sol, and Southern Humanities Review. He is a professor at George Mason University, co-editor of Kikwatu, a journal of East African literature, and co-organizer of the Fox City Literary Reading Series. His second collection of short stories is coming out with Cornerstone Press in 2028. And now I will hand it over to you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Mandy Lynn, and for everyone who's here. I'm honored to be here to moderate this event. I'm so excited to talk about Lauren's book, especially in this capacity, because I understand that most people on this call are writers and probably interested in talking about craft. And the thing about Lauren's book for me is it just is so rich in sort of its layers of dealing with craft and story in different ways. So I'm super excited to be here to talk about that. I am currently in Fairfax, Virginia, about like 30 minutes from Lauren, who's in Washington, D.C. And we met through the Washington, D.C. area literary community a few years ago. It's been great getting to know Lauren as a writer. I admire her work so much, but I also admire what she does for the literary community here. Two things that were not in her bio that I'll mention is that she started the what's called Lit Box, and it's a vending machine based in DC that sells local books by local writers from like the DC area. It's really awesome, and it seems to be doing well selling books. And then she also co-hosts or co-organize and co-host a monthly literary reading series out of her home so generously with her spouse, who is also a fantastic writer. And she's just such a good literary citizen, someone who contributes so much to the community here. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about her book, which is really good. Just an incredible book, and the characters and the stories have just been swimming around in my head. And so I'm so excited to talk about it. And as it's already been mentioned, it's winning lots of awards. It's been on lists, well deserved, and I'm sure much more to come. I think Lauren is going to read for like 5 to 10 minutes now from the book, and then we'll get into some craft questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, both of you. And that's one of the joys of literary community is I get to meet so many writers I admire, including Michael and his wonderful stories. Big fan of them. So check out Partners and Strangers from Carnegie Mellon. But I'll start reading just the first story from my collection because it kind of sets the tone. It's a little bit weird and surreal, as are about half the stories. So I'll dive in with The Shapeshifter. The shapeshifter met her husband during her horse era. She, gleaming and muscular, with a chestnut coat and black mane. He, heart pounding, face sweating. A few weeks into their time together, he licked his lips and said there must be no one like her in all the world. The horse was a good form, and she enjoyed long, frequent walks with the man and being an agreeable partner. She decided that he didn't have to know every side of her. Sometimes at night with her friends, she was the vulture, laughing, raucous, ugly laughter that left her feeling free and full of life. But the man loved her, and she was happy with him in their little house surrounded by trees, or at least the horse form was happy. They married quickly, and after a few months, while they were walking through the garden of their new home, he began a new conversation in a roundabout way, telling her how he loved her muscles and the way she ran, how he'd first fallen for her when he saw her sleek coat reflecting the sun, how her mane and tail flew behind her when she galloped. And he was very happy with her. And also, since they were going to be together for the rest of their lives, wouldn't it be fun for both of them if she introduced another form? Knowing that she could, after all, take other forms, as she told him once, though he'd never seen it. And, he added, he knew she'd done it in a past relationship, but not for him. What kind of form? A swan, he said. He'd been thinking about swans lately, couldn't get them off his mind. He noticed them at the pond, which he passed daily when he took a certain route to work, and in city gardens. They had such soft, regal feathers, those coy black masks, bright orange beaks. A horse was certainly a majestic creature, but a swan. He let out a soft groan of longing. That evening, the shapeshifter looked herself over in their bedroom mirror and noticed her back swayed in a way it hadn't before, that her coat was rougher than she remembered. It was true a swan wouldn't age in the same way as a horse, or wouldn't seem to. It was just that she didn't like to transform for others. But after some thinking, she decided it would be her choice after all. A long neck and graceful body might do her good, and maybe, after all, she was doing it for herself. And so, after securing promises that her husband did still treasure her from mane to fetlocks, the shapeshifter transformed into an elegant white swan. In the mornings, when she went foraging for worms and frogs and other delicacies, she could feel him watching her lovingly out the window. And she did feel a little more beautiful, even than when she was a horse, though she couldn't run as quickly. And he was more attentive now and stroked her long white feathers as he had once stroked her mane, and said she was more attractive than any of the other swans, had a more perfect curve to her neck, such soft cloud-like wings. Sometimes her neck got twisted in the bed sheets, and her tail was uncomfortable, but she liked her life as a swan, despite the quiet, nagging feeling of missing the galloping through the hillsides, and the other feeling, which was that there were still parts of herself she had hid from him. Sometimes at night, while her husband was sleeping, she turned into a bat and flew out the window. She could blend perfectly into the night sky. Unseen, she banged in freedom against the eaves, watching the stars above, catching bugs, sailing through the black summer air. She felt more agile and freer than she ever did in the daytime. Elation. And then at the end, she would come back because she did love and miss her husband and didn't want that soaring freedom forever, only for a little while. Sometimes she wished to be something grotesque for the feel of it. Once, when her husband was out of town, she went drinking in a dive bar as a terrible tarantula and met with strange men who never imagined she was a woman at all, just a form, a terrible spider. That night, she bought drinks for everyone and stayed out until 2 in the morning, telling stories, and not once did anyone ask her to be anything other than who she was. This, later, she would recall as the happiest night of her life. At the end of the night, she embraced the men she was drinking with, using all 8 hairy arms, and did not flinch when they stroked hers in return. After she'd been a swan for a few months, her husband began to feel more absent and no longer gave the look of desire. He became agitated about the grass and beetle parts she dropped on the kitchen floor when she wasn't careful and the sounds of her honking. One afternoon, he began to tell her again how happy she'd made him, how in love with her he was, and how, wouldn't it be better? She could feel it coming. They contemplated other forms. It seemed everywhere they went, she could feel him watching other birds and fish and mammals. She began to fear then that the problem really was her, that by sharing who she really was and what she was capable of, she had created the situation. One night, over a plate of algae and spiders, the shapeshifter asked her husband to table the conversation of forms, and so they did. They held a party where their friends touched her soft feathers in conversation and admired her as she circled their home in flight. At the party, too, was a little snow leopard her husband had met through friends, dappled and fierce, and she noticed his eyes resting on the leopard's haunches. A week after the party, her husband asked the shapeshifter, apropos of nothing, whether she'd ever thought about becoming a snow leopard. She swung her long neck in his direction. Really, a snow leopard? He said the idea had just come to him from nowhere, and wasn't there some essential sweetness and life to their love if they could just capture it again like they had once? And snow leopards strutted with such sinuous grace, and she should really show herself off more anyhow. He hadn't thought about that before with the swan suggestion. It was his fault, but another form would solve everything. There was something alluring about the man that had made her fall for him in the first place that came down to his desire for her. It was a powerful feeling being swept up in a gaze like that, most of all when she saw herself as he saw her, a gleaming horse, a regal swan, a snow leopard. She felt as though she might do anything to maintain that feeling. Sometimes it was hard to know herself at all except through his eyes. She began to feel the tiniest sliver of doubt and wondered, deep down, whether she had a true self, and if she did, whether the bat or the tarantula was a truer self than the horse or the swan, which were also her but not the whole her, and if so, how she would ever tell her husband whom she loved. After a long fight that went into the night, she agreed to change once more, adding that after that she wouldn't change again for him for a full year and he shouldn't bother asking. He agreed. In the morning, she was an emu. She relished the moment when he realized what had happened and wordlessly brought his hand to his mouth. She liked being tall, high on spindly legs, and with no iridescence or grace. She could see better out of the windows of their home. She could reach all the high kitchen shelves without flying. Their friends commented she had really let herself go. But the thing that surprised her was how happy and careless and free this form made her. She dropped berries and seeds all over, and they got buried in the textured carpet, and she found herself more affectionate toward her husband and sought to nuzzle him in the evenings, even though she could feel him growing more distant. Eventually, the shapeshifter's husband declared he was tired of the very idea of forms, and one day she saw him watching a woman who lived nearby, who was always herself, shaking out the rugs into her garden, and he gave that pained look of longing. The shapeshifter decided she had no other recourse left. She would get a tattoo. The idea enthralled her because it would mark a constant self, despite the shifting forms, something she had long desired. The tattoo did not save the marriage, of course. Her husband left her, but the shapeshifter did love her tattoo. It was a drawing of a yellow butterfly, her favorite form, which she now adopted, and what was better than a butterfly with a tiny butterfly tattoo? She had gotten it on her stomach while she was still an emu. Her butterfly form was light and lively, and she made sure to flutter by once in the window while her former husband and the woman were having breakfast. And she knew that he saw her, and that was all that she wanted as she embraced her new form, the emblem of shapeshifters. The shapeshifter told the story of her tattoo over drinks with friends like this. There was once a woman who got a tattoo after falling hopelessly in love with a man who thought she was very nearly perfect, except for that which made her essentially herself. Then she marked her stomach to remember the essential self. The shapeshifter found the tattoo very funny. All her friends did too, and she exposed her belly and they poked at it, looking closer and closer to find a tiny butterfly tattoo on the tiny belly of a butterfly. It tickled, and her laughter was a happy microscopic tinkling. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. I think that's a great story to get us started because as I read your book, I really thought a lot about as you mentioned, like maybe half the stories are kind of living in the surreal, kind of allegorical, and then you have other sort of like longer stories that are more just like hard realism. I'm thinking of like I don't know. Bear sightings as one, or Clementine. And then you have some of these other stories that are like really kind of experimenting with form that are more conceptual, like is she a witch, a quiz, and timetable for eating alone. They kind of have this like formal structure. So do you, when you're working on a story, do you know right away kind of like what plane of reality you're writing in, or whether you're doing something more conceptual or character driven, or does that come later, or does it depend on the story?
Yeah, I think it depends. And I'm curious how your writing process is. But I think usually I have either an idea or a voice that I'm kind of playing around with. And every once in a while, it'll just kind of work. Like the second story in the collection is kind of some run-on sentences that just worked. But that's the exception. Usually it's I start somewhere and I realize I have maybe the wrong container for it, or the form. Like I'll have a story and I'm like, I want to tell the story, but it doesn't feel alive. And so I'll kind of experiment with different, perspectives or different forms, or maybe I'll play with the structure until it kind of clicks. So I think it's a lot of trial and error.
So would that be like a full, almost like a full rewrite with some of these stories, or is it just kind of
Yeah.
like I'm kind of tweaking, I'm changing the point of view, or like is there a story in here where you did just like a complete, like just tore it down because the container didn't work?
Yeah, I mean the one I just read, I didn't tear it apart. The voice kind of stayed the same,
Yeah.
but I took it and I chopped it in half and I moved the middle to the end
Yeah.
because it was a long story and I realized the middle, that happy moment was like actually my ending, whereas the rest of the story was this like long sad tale. And then I was like, why am I doing that? That's not, it needs to be light. So I did change the form on that. I think rarely do I entirely change the perspective, but every once in a while, I'll find out like the side character actually needs to be telling the story.
Mhm.
I don't think it happened in this collection, but it has definitely happened to me.
So, one of the stories that I'm curious about is dinner time, and kind of along the same lines. And it starts off, and I feel like I think this is kind of a realist story, and then there's this like turn, like three-quarters of the way in. It's like a very short story, but it does like turn to the kind of surreal or absurd. Um, when you're writing a story like that, are you surprised? Like, were you surprised when that happened, or did you kind of already have that moment and you were writing to it? Um,
I think I had that moment. Oftentimes I'm surprised, but for that one, I had that moment first because I just like it's a story about, cooking dinner and all the kids are yelling and all this stuff is happening on. And I don't think I could sustain interest in the story if I didn't know something weird was going to happen because I'm like, okay,
right.
this is just everybody's lives, of a certain if you're in a particular um kind of life. So yeah, that one I did kind of feel like how do you get to that feeling?
Yeah. Okay. Just back, I'm going to back up and zoom out because I realize, yeah, not everyone has read the book. So the book is super rich, 28 stories, I think, is what I counted, ranging from like 100 words, maybe, or about 100 word stories. There's like one or two of those to like a more traditional length, kind of character driven, like 12, 14-page stories. Um, and the stories are just like super varied, which is one of the things that I admire so much about it, is they're so varied in like the characters, the place, the style, but yet it all like holds the length, but yet it all holds together really well. Like there's a real cohesiveness to this. collection, which I think is really impressive for something that's like 28 stories. It all feels like it they're all in conversation with each other.
They're
Um,
written for like 20 years apart. I mean,
yeah,
the oldest one was
that's what I
like
was gonna
as
ask
an
you.
undergrad. It's very
Yes,
scary.
that's the question. Like, how did it all come together? When did you realize it was like a book? How did you choose which stories to include since it's like over 20 years?
Yeah. And I'll kind of turn this to, it's a great question, and I'll kind of turn this to a craft thing too that some of y'all can probably speak to as writers. I think like when you spend enough time writing, no matter what you do, you always sound like yourself. You can't get away from it, you know? And I find that I'm like, I'm gonna do a prompt. Okay, I'm still myself. It's, you know, my voice, my themes. I'm gonna do this other thing. So I felt after writing for a really long period of time, um a I did experiment with some different writing prompts, and I can tell you some of my favorite ones. But you know, some of those kind of interesting form ones did come from you know a prompt I found. Like the title story was, I think there was a writer's prompt like have an adult do something that they shouldn't, that children should be doing. You know, and I thought about the game of make believe, and that's kind of where the title came from. So that's a long roundabout way of saying these stories kind of found their forms through various influences, through writers' prompts, and through a combo of being influenced by writers I really love and admire and respect, who are honestly about half in the realist school and half in the surrealist. So I like experimenting with both. Um, and the way they kind of came together, I mean, I had been writing quite seriously for probably 15 years before this story, before I had any book or before anything coalesced, and actually unseriously writing longer than that. But but I think the a big chunk of them I wrote, you know, gosh, pre-COVID when I was going through my divorce and my kids were very young. And so a lot of the stories are kind of infused with ends of relationships, young children, single parenting, a lot of those things. And so that was kind of like the heart of it. But then with that, I was able to pull in, you know, other strands here and there, but keep that kind of center.
I think that's such a good point, though, about how like you always will sound like yourself, even when you're growing as a person and a writer. It's still you, and it's your
Weird.
consciousness. Yeah, it is weird. Yeah, kind of scary, and also kind of like liberating in a way. I don't know, a
Yeah.
little
Like you
bit of
can't get too far from yourself no matter what you do.
yeah.
You're like, I'm gonna try and do something cool Joy Williams would do. And you're like, no, you're really just yourself, but you've added a little element of you know, some surrealism.
It's the same way as if like you have a messy car and you're like one day just like I'm gonna keep a cleaner car. Like you'll do it a little bit, but it'll be messy again. Yeah, you can't get too far away from it. You
New
can't
Year's
escape.
resolutions don't work. You are always yourself.
You're always, yeah, lean into it. One of the questions I want to ask, like when you're in a workshop, when one is in a workshop setting, which you know, whether you're in grad school or these, you know, workshops, uh, a lot of like there's like often focus on just kind of like that sort of like traditional narrative arc. You know, like this is what a short story kind of does. A lot of workshops are and I think there's like more awareness now on why that's not necessarily like the best way to think about storytelling. But you definitely subvert it in a lot of your stories, or at least like that arc isn't so obvious. And I think you do it really skillfully because all your stories are like very satisfying to me. And so why would I care about, you know, a traditional narrative arc? Like one story that comes to mind is Inner Chamber, which is like the character tells, for those of you who haven't read the book, the character is like caught inside. She's like actually literally inside the heart of her ex, one of her exes. And so like, what do you think a story like has to do? Like, what does a short story have to accomplish to be kind of complete and satisfying? Like, how do you feel like you know when that's happened? I hate to say the word finished. People ask me that question. I'm like, forget finished, but just like, when do you feel it's kind of complete or, you know, maybe satisfying?
I mean, there's like the textbook answer and then there's the gut
Yeah.
answer. right?
Go.
And
Yeah.
I feel like it's good to learn the textbook answer, and I'm glad that I spent all that time studying story structure and, all the things. It's like a character starts here and changes by the end, except sometimes they don't change, right? Except
Right.
sometimes, sometimes there's an arc and they don't. So it's like every rule there is an exception. So I think I've spent a long time reading a lot of kind of classical story structures that I like, and then realizing many of them follow rules, and then sometimes you get to subvert the rules. And so I think, there's the intuition that something obviously changes, right? You read the story for a reason, or there's a realization. But then I think mostly it's kind of a gut feeling that, you feel completed. And I think in my mind, it's like whatever you set up has to be satisfied, right? So if I raise some questions or if I raise some stakes, they want to resolve in some way. I don't ever want the reader to get to the end and be like, well, you set up this great question or you set up this great premise and then you kind of forgot about it. So I think it's a
Right.
question of like, did I do what I said I was going to do in the first few paragraphs? And sometimes if I don't know how I'm going to end a story, I have no idea. I'll just actually like reread the first paragraph or two and I'll be like, is there a clue? What was my subconscious brain doing? Like there's this weird detail in there. I don't know why it's in there, but maybe that provides a clue as to the ending. And sometimes you're sort of like dialoguing with your subconscious, like, why did I do that? I don't know, but maybe there's something in there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like what you said about just kind of like answering the question, or even just kind of dealing with the question that the story raises. I noticed a lot of your characters are either, or some of them are children to adolescents, or they're adults looking back on sort of adolescence. The story, the one with the is it Room for Three, the one with the lawyer? Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that story in particular, there's an adult narrator who is a lawyer, but it also toggles back to her like narrating some like childhood, like a childhood story as well. There's like two kind of stories juxtaposed, adult and child. How do you like access the consciousness so well of like the adolescence or the children, and I feel like that's something I kind of struggle with. And does being a parent help with that? Like, are those stories, did you write more of them as once you became a parent, or is there no correlation there?
Yeah, I think interestingly that story actually came to me when I was reading Anne Lamott's lovely craft
Oh,
book by
okay.
Bird. And she has some line in there that's like, if you don't know what to write about, imagine yourself back at your school lunch table and who is there and think about it. And I was like, oh man, like what a throwback, what a fun place to start. So I actually kind of started with this old Dallas classroom and then got to the lawyer scene and toggled back and forth. But I find it easy. I'm interested. I want to ask you, Michael, why? What, do you feel separated from your former self? Because I feel quite connected to my past self. Like I feel like everything I ever felt as a teenager is like very vividly still there in a lot of ways, like even the embarrassments and all the things. And so I feel like it's kind of easy to access that self. And then of course with children again, you get to relive it. So, our teens and preteens, I'm sure they're tired of me saying, well, when I was in school, this happened to me, but you go back to that self. So I don't know if you feel similarly.
I mean, I feel like one, your memory is probably just better than mine, because I feel like my memory doesn't get good until I'm like in my teenage years.
Okay.
So I feel like but the thing is, as I've been like sitting in my 4-year-old's bedroom at night and telling him childhood stories, I feel like things, like more things have kind of resurfaced and it's become easier for me. So I do wonder, like that's part of the reason why that question wasn't out of nowhere. It was coming from,
It'll
I
come
was
back
like,
to you.
yeah, are you having a similar experience as me? Yeah, so I do feel like I have been able to maybe access like my childhood and adolescent like consciousness a little bit better since having children.
Yeah. And I think I read like my first real influence when I was trying to become a writer was probably Alice Munro, who I
Mhm.
read differently now, but she was certainly a huge influence to me. And the way she wrote about girlhood kind of blew my mind. And it's
Yeah.
like intricacies and the little political things and all these like, um, this just clear-eyed view into the cruelties of childhood. Like I never read anything like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And who, like you mentioned, you had other influences, some that were kind of more realist, and some obviously Alice Munro in the realist camp. Who were some of the other ones that kind of influenced your work well over the last 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, many her certainly Grace Paley because of just
Oh, yeah.
her punchy, lovely language. For surrealism, a whole lot. I mean, Joy Williams is a master. Stephen Millhauser and his concept stories always blow me away. He's just so worth rereading. Yeah, just a few that come to mind.
Yeah, cool. Um, I wanted to ask you, does it seems like most of the kind of like more character driven, longer stories in the book are in like a close third person point of view. Um, does third person just come naturally to you? Like when you sit down to write or you're using a writing prompt or whatever, do you just start writing in third person? And if so, you're really skilled at it, and I think first person comes more naturally to me, and I'm always like, how can I get better at third person? But I'm curious, like, what draws you to writing in the third person for these kind of more character driven stories, and um, yeah, and what do you see it kind of like doing for your work in the way that you write? Excuse me.
Yeah, and I'm curious why you write in first person. That's so interesting. I
Yeah.
had for a lot of years a novel that I tooled around with that did not go forward, and the world is better for it. It was like that was not the project that was meant to be, but it was all in first person.
Mhm.
And I kind of inhabited that space for a long time while I was struggling with it. And I was doing these stories on the side and I think I really wanted to distance myself from that other project. And so I think the third person was really helpful because my first person for a long time was this particular character. And these stories had to be a way that to separate. And so I don't know if I have maybe there are first persons in here. I don't really know, but I think I had to like rethink my
Yeah.
relationship to first person after that and like have a new first person because I spent a really long time on that project and had to slowly distance myself when I realized it wasn't what I wanted it to be.
I think Clementine is actually in first
Oh,
person.
you're right. Yeah.
That's
Right.
the one out of like your kind of longer stories. I think that's the one that's in first person, which is a great story. I love that story. Do you find like with third person, do you find that you're able to do a better job of like, or more easily accessing characters that are like more like different from you, or is that irrelevant, or is it just kind of I'm just wondering because sometimes I feel like that does help for me if I'm trying to try
Mhm.
out a character that I might not be as close to as some of the ones I write about. I'm just
Yeah.
curious if that's
I
part of
think it can work both ways. I think
yeah.
you can try out a character that's totally different. And I think it can help you zoom out a little and think about their world. And like, Michael was at a book talk and these things were happening. But I think also it can help if I have a character that feels too similar to me, then it creates the narrative distance, and lets you be a little bit more free and depart for yourself because you get kind of tired of yourself. And so if you're writing about someone who feels close, then, it's not me, it's somebody else with these other things happening to them.
Yeah. No, I think that that rings really true to me. In fact, I'm as you're saying that, I'm like, this project I'm working on, I've got to switch to third person right now. Excuse me while I take a moment to change my work to
I'm
third
like,
person.
I need to try first. It's weird. You write enough and you get your like little ticks and your tendencies, and you're like,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And again, that kind of circles back to earlier when you were saying like you can't really escape yourself. But it is cool that with like these formal decisions, you can always like try new things. Um,
Yeah.
and it's always worth even if it's just an exercise like trying it. So Um, Note to self: try third person when I write tomorrow.
Yeah, it's
Um,
yeah.
so one of the things another thing I wanted to ask you about is backstory. I think you handle backstory really well. Again, I think I'm talking more about sort of some of the longer, more character driven stories when I'm thinking about this. But do you typically know like a character's present? Like, do you usually like have like a present moment and then you kind of figure out the tension behind that moment and kind of figure out backstory, or do you usually have like some backstory? Or again, probably the answer is it depends. I'm guessing, um, but maybe the more important question is how do you know when something feels like? I feel like what I really admire about your kind of integration of like backstory in the present moment, and um, I'm thinking again about like Room for Three as that story with the lawyer and the childhood. You don't like it's very easy to like have backstory that's like too on the nose, and it's like, oh, this terrible thing happened to this person, so it's like so obvious that this is what's going to happen, but you do it in a way that kind of isn't like head on. It's like it's sort of coming at it from the side a little more than that, and feels kind of true to real life. So how do you have any like thoughts on like how you do that, or is it just kind of magic?
I think that like it's good for backstory to evolve organically. I'm not an incredibly analytical writer, and I'm always fascinated by people who are because you can do it in any number of ways. I have friends who, particularly novel writing, will like sketch out their characters, like map out all their qualities, and then like map out who would be a good foil. And it's like this jigsaw puzzle. And I'm like, that is amazing. My brain could never in a million years do that. And if I did do that, it still wouldn't work, you know? So I never know the backstory in advance, but I do kind of let it draw out organically. And I think it's helpful. Like whenever I write something, we all do this probably as writers, but you kind of lead with the subconscious a little bit and you just kind of find these little details and you're like, why is that detail in there? I wonder if it's because of this. Well, then maybe this, and you're kind of being led along the way toward discovery, which is the fun part of it. And I think so, yeah, it kind of happens like that. Is that how you do backstory? How do you kind of figure out your characters?
So yeah, I think if it's not organic, then I mean, I go through phases of or stages while writing a story of something like feeling contrived, but I'll know it in my heart of hearts. I'll know it, and then I'll wait,
Yeah.
or I'll keep writing, or I'll rewrite till something more organic comes. And often it's like something happens in real life, like I hear a story from someone, or I experience something. I'm like, oh, that's what happened to that character.
Right. Yeah. I remember hearing it described once as like a magnet. When you're writing something, the world kind of like magnetizes things.
Yeah,
Just pull out the details at the right time, not to be superstitious about it, but I feel like it always happens, right? You're in the middle
yeah.
of a story and somebody drops in some dialogue and you're like, that's what they would say, and you're like stealing little pieces. So yeah, same feeling.
And I think that's why it's important to be like a little bit patient with work, because it might just be around the corner when that detail comes.
Yeah.
But I'll wrap up because I think there's like I want to make sure there's time. I think there's a lot of questions in the chat, but yeah, what are you like working on now, and two-parter, and then like in general, just because we were just talking about sort of the process, like um how long does it usually take you to like write a story? Maybe start with that. How long does it take you to write a story? Like, what's that process like? And then also, what are you working on now? And then,
Yeah, the shortest story in the collection was written in a day, and the longest one was I sent it off for probably 7 years before it got accepted anywhere, and I felt like it was done. So between a day and 7 years, usually, you know, maybe 6 months is the average. I'm not a fast writer, busy life. So
yeah.
kudos to those of you who are.
And what are you working on now? And then
Oh,
I think it's probably time then to get to the chat questions because I want to make sure there's time for that.
good. I'm I'm polishing up a second short story collection that I've also been working on for a long time. Publishing is slow, and it's a lot funnier. So this one was very serious, and the other one is just kind of a jokey collection that was a lot of fun to write, and I was in a different frame of mind. So yeah, should be.
Are the stories in that one also, is there kind of a range in like the sort of mode of narration or and like the form and all that, or are they?
Yeah, yeah, they're pretty weird. They're pretty diverse. They're all over the place, but they're actually kind of focused on foreign policy because during my other life I work in government on foreign policy stuff and there's a lot of thoughts on there. So I'm taking some serious subjects and making them light and,
Yeah,
showing absurdity. So yeah.
it sounds great. Sounds what we kind of need right now, what the world needs right now. I think Mandy Lynn, is it time to turn to chat questions? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. We can kind of run down in order, unless y'all have a particular order. I guess going back and going to Ruben's question, and hello, it's nice to see another great writer here too. In terms of like how we arrange stories, uh, I used to just say kind of throw them in and throw your best ones out there. But I am learning to be more thoughtful about how they end up kind of cohesively and tell a story and give a reader experience. So in this collection, I'll confess, I just sort of threw them in there without a lot of thought and had an editor who ordered them better. But yeah, I think it's really, really good to think about your stories thoughtfully and find the little ties in between. I don't know what others do. There is another good question about if you give yourself permission to write the surreal or does it come naturally? No, I don't think it came naturally. I think a lot of us grew up on realism, although that's changing. I think I was reading a lot of folks and Carmen Maria Machado and a lot of others, and I thought, it's really cool what others are doing. And a lot of the Flash community does a lot of surrealism. And so being influenced by that, I think felt like giving myself permission to just be a little more out there with stories. Um, there, there, there was a question on third person. If you position your narration as an unseen narrator in your mind, or someone close to the story, or far from it, that's such an interesting question. I don't know. I think it's someone really close. I think it's hard to go far. I think maybe because when I was taking writing classes, it was like no omniscient narration, like it was like drilled into me, like, and it was always like close third. And so I think I really took that in. And so I've always been kind of afraid to do anything but like close third. And then I learned that, in a lot of new novels, like people are doing all crazy things with points of view, like you're mind hopping and like doing omniscient and doing all these things. So I'm not there, but I'm kind of fascinated by the number of narrative techniques that people are using even within a single story, which is cool. Um, and there was a comment, congrats on winning the Sergio Troncoso Award for Best First Book of Fiction. Yeah, thank you. I got that from the Texas Institute of Letters, which was shocking and amazing. And as a Texan, for more than the first. Okay, less than the first half of my life. I'm getting older, but for approximately half of my life before I get any older, it means so much because that's the place I grew up and where all my family still lives and where I go every few months. So getting that was like very, very cool tied to home. And I'm going to be in College Station next month celebrating that. So yeah. Um, let's see. There was a question on a story that took 7 years. Yeah, it was not about finding the home. I'm gonna ask you, Michael, or actually I'm gonna call on people in the audience to see if you have different thoughts. Okay, so for me, I'm very superstitious when stories start to take a long time. And I I think at least if it's like a really long time and a story's not getting picked up, I feel like the story does not want to be complete yet and it wants to be something else. Like I'll send it out, and if it's been several months and I'm just getting no's, 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 I'm like, okay, the story needs a change of form, it needs a rethink, or it needs deepening. But like whatever it is, the story does not want to go out into the world as it is, you know? And so I will always revise. I'm constantly revising. And like when I'm sending stories out, sometimes I'm like sending it out in one version and then another, and then like I'll have four different versions out, and I don't know which one's going to get accepted. But so I don't know. I think it's like a story's always changing and it's more interesting when it changes. I get bored of sending the same story out. What do other folks do? Do you just know that you're done, or are you just changing your stories? Michael, I'll put you on the
Yeah, I
spot.
was going to say if no
You know
one
when you're
else, I'll,
done.
happy to answer that. Well, first of all, I'll say that a lot of my stories take like 8 or 10 years to write because I often do this thing where I burst out of the gates. I write like the first quarter or third of a story. And these are usually like longer stories, not super short stories. And then I put it aside and I just like can't figure it out. I'll write like a third or a half of it, and then I'll just either tinker with it for a while or just put it aside. And then finally, that thing that we were talking about earlier, where I like figure it out, happens. And so for me, it often just takes a long time to finish it. But in terms of getting them published, if it's a longer story, I just don't see it as I don't feel like it's necessarily a sign. I just feel like it's hard to get longer stories published. But I the
True.
same thing with you. Like I will continue to just kind of look back at it. Sometimes it's very light revisions, and sometimes it's like, okay, something here is clearly not working, and I'll do like a bigger revision and then try again. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. There was a question about how we feel about abrupt endings or cliffhangers. I think it's up to kind of up to the book or the genre, in general. I like to close things off because I feel like there is always more material there. There's infinite riches in your stories. And I got this advice once that was like, don't withhold anything, just trust that there will be more material for the next thing. And so I think I'm of the mind that if I can think of a way to end it and tie it all together and provide some satisfaction, like I will do that. Um, and then trust that, you know, if there were another book that's a follow on, people will find satisfaction and then want to go to the next thing. But I know there's different conventions in different genres. I mean, certainly some TV shows that I watch give cliffhangers. So, you know, and I still want to watch them. Um, how do you know when you're done? Yeah, I think it's kind of that same question. I don't. I don't think I've ever done. You know, if I could go back and like edit the stories in these book, I'd be like, yeah, 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 yeah. I need to deepen that character. Like, I don't know. I think your job is to just never be totally satisfied, right? If you're satisfied, you're complacent, and then you're not getting better. So it's like, okay, good enough. I feel like it clicks, and so I'm gonna send it out. But, you know, I could still I could still revise. Um, I saw a note about 100 word stories. If anybody reads 100-word story, it's a really good publication. I like um, they're just they're fun short stories. It's a whole journal of them.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Got a lot of really good questions.
Yeah, I know.
And also, if anybody wants to take themselves off of mute to ask a question, that's perfectly okay also. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's okay. If nobody else has any final questions, um, do you guys have any other comments, Michael or Lauren?
um, I had one other question that, if we have time, I was just one thing we didn't get to, Lauren. I'm curious, does having a book out, someone asked me this when my book came out, and it really made me think. Does having a book out change the way you think about like what you're working on in any way? Like just having gone through that experience, has it changed your writing at all?
Yeah.
Or like how you decide how to spend your writing time, I guess is maybe the better way of phrasing it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it has made me more patient, which is something that I maybe should have felt from the beginning. But I think when I was writing for all these, 20 years, and 15 of them serious, I never really felt like I would have a book. I always joke to my friends that I had a graveyard of unfinished stories in my file folder. And like you, I'd get them to 80 or 90%, and they would just sit there for years and years. Um, and I think what that made me feel for a while was that they weren't going to get out into the world, and therefore I was kind of pushing myself to just get them out, whether or not I felt that they were truly done. And I think once you sort of trust yourself a little bit and feel like, okay, this is going to happen, or there will be a book, or there will be something, then it makes you patient. Because you're like, well, I don't have to rush. I don't have to prove that I can publish this story. I can just kind of trust the process and be very patient and know that I may not see results for a long time, or years can go by and I can kind of keep working on these. Um, and let them become what they're going to be without feeling like I have to kind of like prove things with getting these little publications. So I think it's made me more patient. And if I could go back in time before the book, I would just tell myself to like, kind of calm down and let the time take that it takes, and not feel like, look at who are these people who just started writing a few years ago and they have their book. Like, forget it. That's not your path, right? Your path is something else, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
And I guess if I had to kind of end with something, I would say, you know, things like this, Gemini Inc., what you'll do is so cool. And I think I've grown as a writer most of all by being in community with other folks like Michael and others, in DC and beyond. Not only grown as a writer by just like listening to your stories and appreciating them, but I feel honestly very sustained by the folks that I've met and admire. And like, there's honestly like, if you're not in a writing group, it's good to do. I've been in writing groups for most of my career. I'm only temporarily out because my kids are being crazy right now, and I have to focus on that. But like, there's honestly nothing better than like seeing your friend. I just had a friend who, you know, um, I've been in a writing group with her for like 15 years, and she got her novel out, but she's been working on that whole time, and like there's no greater joy than like cheering on your friends and, and that stuff. It's like as good as doing your own work. So, shout out to literary community and getting your writing groups going.
I can
Yeah.
second that. Um, I love the work we do, and we love being in conversation and sharing the craft of writing. So thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Michael, both so much for being here. So we will have the full video online on YouTube within a couple of days. So if you want to revisit this conversation, please visit us on YouTube. Valerie just dropped a link in the chat to donate if you're interested in donating towards our big move for our community. And we also have our survey link in the chat. So if you like this program and you'd like to continue to see programs like this brought by Gemini Inc., please fill out the survey. Let us know how you feel. Oh, look, you got a kid behind you, Lauren. That was the first time. That's awesome. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time, and I hope everybody has a lovely night.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
You everyone.